When two teenagers were abandoned with nothing, they made a desperate choice to buy a forgotten grain elevator for $5. What they found inside wasn't just rust and ruin, but a chance to rebuild their lives and expose a devastating family secret. If you've ever felt lost or abandoned, or like the world had given up on you, hit that subscribe button, because this story is for you. This is about how my sister and I found our home in the most unlikely place on earth. The silence was the first thing that really hit me. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of it. The sound of our Aunt Carol's tires spitting gravel as she pulled away. The sound of the engine noise fading until it was just a memory. And then the overwhelming, humming silence of a flat, empty highway in late October. The air was cold, the kind of damp cold that gets into your bones and stays there. And the sky was the color of a dirty nickel. My sister Maya stood beside me, not looking at the road where the car had disappeared, but at me. She had her arms wrapped around herself, her knuckles white. She was 18, 2 years older than me, which in the eyes of the world made her the adult. It was a cruel joke. We were both just kids. "Well," she said, her voice trying for a strength it didn't have. It came out thin, a little shaky. "That's that." I didn't say anything. I just stared down at the asphalt, at the dark, oily stain where Carol's car had been parked. Kicked out. The words felt stupid, like something from a bad movie. But there we were. 2 backpacks with a few changes of clothes, a beat-up cooler with some sandwiches and water bottles, and the keys to Maya's car, a 20-year-old sedan that coughed more than it ran. We had exactly $173 between us. That was it, the sum total of our existence, after our parents died 2 years ago, and our grandfather, the last person who truly felt like family, passed 6 months back. Carol, our mother's sister, had taken us in with a sigh and a constant monologue about her sacrifice. Today, that sacrifice had apparently reached its limit. The argument had been about nothing, about everything, about the cost of groceries, about the noise I made coming in from my after-school job, about Maya needing the car to look for work. It ended with her pointing to the door. "I've done my part," she'd said, her face pinched and sour. "You're 18, Maya. You can sign your own lease. And Leo can go with you. It's time you two learned to stand on your own feet." We were alone. The weight of it was a physical thing, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. 2 years of living in a house that never felt like a home, of walking on eggshells, of feeling like a burden. And now, this. Freedom, I guess, but it felt a lot more like falling. Maya took a deep breath, the cold air fogging in front of her face. "Okay, Leo. Okay, let's just get in the car. We can't stay here." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. We climbed into the old sedan. The vinyl seats were cracked and cold. The car smelled like old coffee and teenage anxiety. Maya put the key in the ignition and turned. The engine gave a pathetic, grinding groan. She tried again. The same sound. On the third try, it caught, rattling to life with a shudder that shook the whole frame. She let out a breath she'd been holding. "Thank God." She pulled onto the highway, driving slowly, like she was afraid the car would just give up if she pushed it too hard. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, my voice raspy. Maya stared straight ahead, her hands gripping the steering wheel. "I don't know. South, I guess? Maybe find a motel for a night, a cheap one. Then we figure it out." Figure it out. The words hung in the air between us. Figure out how to find a place to live with no deposit. Figure out how to find jobs with no address. Figure out how to finish my last 2 years of high school. It was a mountain so high I couldn't even see the top. I watched the barren fields roll by, the skeletal remains of corn stalks sticking up from the dirt like broken fingers. Everything looked dead. We drove for an hour, the silence in the car just as heavy as the silence on the roadside. Maya had the radio on low, some tinny pop song that felt completely alien to our situation. I was scrolling through my phone, not looking at anything, just watching the no service icon flicker on and off. Then, an idea sparked in my head. A stupid, desperate idea. It came from a memory, a story our grandfather used to tell. Prairie Ridge, I said, the name tasting strange on my tongue. Maya glanced at me. What? Prairie Ridge, remember? Grandpa's town, where he grew up. Leo, that's like 3 hours from here, in the middle of nowhere. Why? He owned something there, I said, the memory becoming clearer. It was one of those stories he'd tell on the porch in the summer, his voice rumbling and warm. A story about his youth, about a place that time forgot. He always joked about it, said he bought it for a song when the railroad pulled out. His retirement plan, he called it. A big, old, rusty something. Maya frowned, concentrating. A barn? I think he said a barn. No, I said, shaking my head. It was bigger, taller. A grain elevator. He said he paid $5 for it in back taxes in the '80s, just to own a piece of the skyline, he'd say. She gave a short, humorless laugh. A grain elevator? Leo, what are we going to do with a grain elevator? It's probably a pile of scrap metal by now, if it even exists. But what if it does? I pressed, the idea taking root, a tiny, fragile shoot of hope in the barren landscape of my mind. He was always so meticulous, with his papers, his finances. When he died, all that stuff went into storage. Carol never went through it. She just paid the bill. The deed has to be in there. And what if it is? Maya shot back, her voice sharp with stress. A piece of paper that says we own a heap of junk in a ghost town? We need a place to sleep tonight, Leo, not a rusty tower. But it's ours, I said, and the words surprised me with their force. It would be ours, not hers, not a shelter's. Ours. And Grandpa, he never sold it. For 40 years he kept paying the taxes on it. It had to be for a reason. Maya was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the rattle of the engine and the whistle of the wind through the car's leaky window seals. I could see the muscles in her jaw working. She was weighing the insane, illogical hope of my idea against the cold, hard reality of our $173. A cheap motel would eat a third of that in one night. Then what? Finally, she pulled over to the side of the road, the car idling rough. She turned to face me, her eyes dark with exhaustion. You're serious? I am, I said. It's a long shot. It's a crazy shot. But it's a shot. And right now, I think it's the only one we have. She stared at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. The hard-edged panic softened just a little, replaced by a flicker of the old Maya, the one who used to build forts with me in the living room, the one who believed in treasure maps and secret passages. A grain elevator, she said, testing the words. She let out a slow, shaky breath. Okay, crazy brother. Let's go find our castle. She pulled out her phone, which thankfully had a bar of service, and typed Prairie Ridge into the map. A single pin dropped in a vast, empty-looking expanse of brown and gray. She turned the car around at the next crossover and headed west, away from the city, away from everything we knew, toward a $5 piece of our grandfather's past. It was the single worst or single best investment in human history. We were about to find out which. The drive to Prairie Ridge felt like a journey to the end of the world. The landscape grew flatter, emptier. The towns we passed through got smaller and smaller, their main streets lined with boarded-up storefronts and faded Coca-Cola signs. The sky was huge and indifferent. Every few miles, a skeletal, rusting oil derrick would break the horizon, motionless. Our car, which we'd nicknamed the Hopeful Coffin, started making a new noise, a rhythmic clicking that got faster as we accelerated. Maya kept her eyes glued to the road, her expression grim. We didn't talk much. The weight of our decision was settling in. We were chasing a ghost story, a memory from a dead man, and burning our last few gallons of gas to do it. About 20 miles out of Prairie Ridge, the clicking in the engine got louder, then turned into a violent clank, and then nothing. The engine cut out. The car coasted to a dead stop on the shoulder of the empty two-lane road. Maya tried the ignition again. Nothing. Not even a groan. Just a dead, final click. She slammed her hands against the steering wheel. "No, no, no, no!" Her voice cracked. She buried her face in her hands, and for the first time since Carol kicked us out, she started to cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but the quiet, hopeless kind that shook her whole body. I put my hand on her shoulder. It felt small and useless. "It's okay," I said, the words tasting like ash. "It's not okay," she choked out, her voice muffled by her hands. "It's not okay, Leo. We're stranded. We have no money. We have a dead car. We're chasing your stupid romantic idea about a pile of rust that probably fell down 30 years ago." I didn't have an answer for that. She was right. It was stupid. It was romantic. It was all we had. I got out of the car. The wind was brutal, cutting right through my thin jacket. In every direction, there was nothing, just flat brown earth and that enormous gray sky. I could feel despair starting to creep in, cold and oily. We'd failed before we'd even begun. I was about to get back in the car to huddle for warmth when I saw it. Far in the distance, maybe a mile or two down the road, a silhouette against the clouds. A cluster of buildings, and rising above them, a tall, cylindrical shape. A silo, a grain elevator. My heart hammered in my chest. "Maya," I said, tapping on her window. She looked up, her face tear-streaked and pale. "Look." She wiped her eyes and squinted, following my pointing finger. She saw it too. A tiny flicker of something that might have been hope crossed her face. "Is that—" "It has to be," I said. "Come on." We grabbed our backpacks and the cooler, locked the dead car that was now just a roadside monument to our failure, and started walking. The walk was miserable. The wind was relentless, and the thin soles of my sneakers were no match for the cold asphalt. But with every step, the silhouette grew larger, more defined. It wasn't just one elevator, it was a whole complex. A massive concrete tower with 6 connected silos, and next to it, an older, taller, rust-colored metal structure. The one from Grandpa's stories. It loomed over the tiny town like a forgotten god. Prairie Ridge was even smaller up close than it had looked from a distance. A single main street with a handful of buildings, a post office, a dusty-looking diner with a flickering open sign, a hardware store, and a lot of empty lots where buildings used to be. The whole place had the feeling of a photograph that had been left out in the sun too long. As we walked down the street, a curtain twitched in a window. We were outsiders, intruders. The grain elevator complex was at the end of a dirt road, right next to the old, abandoned railroad tracks. Up close, it was breathtaking. The concrete silos were stained and streaked with years of weather, but they looked solid, like ancient Roman columns. But it was the metal one that held my attention. It was a patchwork of rusted red and brown panels, easily 100 feet tall, with a head house perched on top like a crown. A long, enclosed conveyor belt sloped down from its side, ending in a collapsed wooden shed. It was magnificent and terrifying all at once. It was a ruin. "This is it," I breathed. Maya just stared, her mouth slightly open. "It's huge." A chain-link fence surrounded the property, sagging in places. A rusted sign hung crookedly from a gate, the words barely legible. Prairie Ridge Farmers Co-op. Trespassers will be prosecuted. The gate was secured with a thick, rusty chain and a heavy padlock. "Now what?" Maya asked, her voice flat. "We're not trespassing if we own it," I said, though my confidence was wavering. We still had no proof. The deed was in a storage unit 3 hours away. We followed the fence line. It was in bad shape. About 50 yards down, a section had collapsed completely, pulled down by overgrown weeds and time. We slipped through the gap. Our feet crunched on the gravel-covered ground. The air was thick with the smell of rust, damp earth, and something else. A faint, sweet, dusty smell. The smell of old grain. We stood at the base of the metal elevator, craning our necks to look up. It was like standing at the foot of a skyscraper. A metal door at the base was boarded up with weathered planks of wood. Another padlock, even rustier than the one on the gate, held a heavy latch in place. We were locked out of our own castle. "Great," Maya said, kicking at a loose piece of gravel. "Just great. We walked all this way for another locked door." I didn't answer. I was running my hand over the rusted metal siding. It was cold and rough, like petrified skin. I felt a strange sense of connection to it, to this place. This was Grandpa's. He'd stood here. He'd touched this same metal. I started walking around the base of the structure, looking for another way in, a broken window, anything. The whole place was sealed up tight. It was clear someone had wanted it to stay that way. I was about to give up when I saw it. Tucked away behind a thicket of thorny bushes near the back, almost completely hidden, was another door. A smaller one, maybe a maintenance access hatch. It wasn't boarded up. It just had a simple, integrated lock, the kind that opens with a flat, odd-shaped key. And dangling from the handle, on a piece of frayed twine, was a small metal tag, so tarnished it was almost black. I picked it up, rubbing the grime away with my thumb. Stamped into the metal were 2 letters. L.M. My breath caught in my throat. Leo Miller, my grandfather, and me. "Maya," I called out, my voice tight. "Get over here." She came around the corner, her expression still doubtful. I showed her the tag. Her eyes widened. "L.M.? "It has to be him," I said. I tugged on the door. It was locked solid. I looked at the strange, flat keyhole. It wasn't a standard lock. Of course not. Nothing about this was standard. "A key," Maya said. "We don't have a key, Leo." But I was already thinking. Grandpa. He was a creature of habit, of systems. He always said, "Everything has its place and every place has its reason. He wouldn't just leave a locked door without a way to open it. It wouldn't be random. I looked around, the bushes, the ground, the wall of the elevator. My eyes fell on a loose piece of metal siding just above the door, about head height. It looked different from the rest, less rusted, the bolts fresher. It was a small panel, maybe a foot square. It was almost invisible. I reached up and pulled at the edge. It didn't move. I braced my feet and pulled harder. With a low groan of protesting metal, it came loose in my hands. And there, inside a small, hollowed-out cavity in the wall, was a small, weatherproof box. My hands were shaking as I lifted it out. It was a simple gray plastic case, the kind you'd use for fishing tackle. I opened the latch. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed foam, was a single, flat, strangely shaped metal key. Maya stared at the key, then at me, then back at the key. A slow smile spread across her face, the first real smile I'd seen all day. "You've got to be kidding me." I took the key. It was heavy, solid. I slid it into the lock. It was a perfect fit. With a bit of force, I turned it. There was a loud, satisfying clunk from inside the door. I pulled the handle. The door swung inward with a deep, echoing groan, opening into darkness. A blast of cool, musty air washed over us, carrying that same smell of dust and ancient grain, but stronger now. It smelled like time itself. We stood there for a moment, peering into the blackness. We had done it. We were in. This was it, the start of something. We had no idea what we would find inside, what secrets this place held. But as I took that first step across the threshold, out of the wind and into the belly of the beast, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a pile of rust anymore. It was a promise. The inside was cavernous. We used the flashlights on our phones to cut through the oppressive dark. The beam illuminated a space that was both bigger and smaller than I had imagined. We were at the bottom of the main elevator shaft. Dust motes, thick as insects, swarmed in the light. The air was still and cold, and every sound we made, our footsteps on the concrete floor, our breathing, echoed up into the unseen heights above. Giant, shadowy machinery loomed in the corners. Massive gears, thick chains, and the enormous funnel of the boot pit, where the grain would have been loaded onto the conveyor leg. It was an industrial cathedral, abandoned by its gods. "Be careful where you step," Maya whispered, her voice hushed with awe. We moved slowly, our lights dancing across the walls. Everything was coated in a thick layer of fine, pale dust. It was like walking through a ruin that had been sealed for a century. We found a steep, narrow metal staircase leading up. It was more like a ladder, bolted to the side of the wall, ascending into darkness. "Up there?" Maya asked, sounding hesitant. "The office is probably in the head house," I said, remembering the layout of these things from a documentary I'd once seen. Everything was controlled from the top. I went first. The metal rungs were cold and slick with dust. The stairway spiraled up the inside of the structure, passing different levels. On one, we found a room full of enormous electric motors, silent and still. On another, a distributor, a complex device with multiple spouts for directing grain, looking like a giant metallic octopus. With every level we climbed, the wind howled louder outside, whistling through unseen cracks in the metal siding. It felt like we were climbing the rigging of a ghost ship. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of climbing, we reached the top. The head house. It was a single large room, about 20 feet by 20 feet, with windows on all four sides. The glass was thick with grime, but thin slivers of the gray afternoon light filtered through, illuminating the space in a hazy, ethereal glow. This was the brain of the elevator. A large, dusty control panel with dozens of switches and levers stood against one wall. In the center of the room was a simple wooden desk and a chair. And on the desk, waiting for us, was a large manila envelope. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Maya and I looked at each other. Her face was pale in the dim light. We approached the desk as if it were an altar. The envelope was thick. Written on the front, in our grandfather's familiar, strong handwriting, were two words: "For Maya." Maya reached out a trembling hand and picked it up. She turned it over. It was sealed with wax, stamped with the same LM as the tag on the door. She broke the seal carefully and pulled out a thick stack of folded papers. On top was a letter, several pages long, written on pale yellow legal paper. Below it, we could see the edges of other documents. One looked like a car title, another looked like a deed. Maya unfolded the letter, took a deep breath, and began to read aloud. Her voice was quiet, steady, but I could hear the emotion trembling beneath it. "My dearest Maya and Leo," she began. "If you are reading this, it means several things have happened. It means I am gone. For that, I am more sorry than you can ever know. It means you have found this place, my rusty old watchtower. And it means you are in trouble. I hope I am wrong about that last part, but I have a feeling I am not. I know my niece, Carol. I know her heart has its limits. I need you to listen to me very carefully. This place, this clunky, ugly, beautiful old elevator, is yours. The deed is in this envelope. It's in your name, Maya, as of your 18th birthday. It is legally, completely, and irrevocably yours. I filed the transfer myself 3 years ago. I paid the property taxes in advance for the next 5 years. No one can take it from you. It is your fortress. I know what you must be thinking. A fortress made of rust, Grandpa? Thanks for nothing. But I need you to trust me. I didn't keep this place for 40 years as a joke. I kept it for you. Our family has a history in this town, a history that was stolen from us. My father, your great-grandfather, helped build this co-op. He poured his life into it, along with a dozen other local farmers. They were cheated, swindled by a smooth-talking man from the city who promised them prosperity and left them with debt. My father lost everything. It broke him. I was just a boy, but I never forgot. I bought this elevator back when it went up for auction, a piece of scrap nobody wanted. It was my own private monument to what we lost, a reminder. But now it needs to be more than a reminder. It needs to be your anchor and your weapon. In this envelope, you will find the deed. You will also find the title to the old pickup truck parked in the shed at the base of the conveyor. It's not much, but I kept it running. The keys are in the glove box. Most importantly, you will find a bank book for a savings account. It's not a fortune, but it's what I could scrape together over the years without anyone knowing. $10,000. It's in a joint account under both your names. You'll need my death certificate to access it, which your lawyer can get. Yes, your lawyer. His name is Arthur Davies. His card is in here. He's an old friend. He knows everything. He will help you. This money is not for running away. It is for staying. It is for turning the lights on. It is for buying groceries at the little store in town. It is for making this place livable. because you need to stay. You need to occupy this land. A few years ago, a company called Viridian Holdings started buying up land all around Prairie Ridge. They'd been quiet about it, using shell corporations, but they've been buying. They want the old railroad line. They want to build a transport hub, a pipeline, something big and ugly. And this property, this rusty old elevator, is right in the middle of their path. They have tried to buy it from me a dozen times. They made offers, then they made threats. They don't know the deed has been transferred to you. They think it's part of my estate, tied up in probate, easy to snatch. They are wrong. Do not sell. I don't care what they offer you. This is not about money. This is about home. This is the only piece of ground on this earth that is truly 100% yours. It is your leverage. It is your legacy. I know this is a heavy burden to place on you. You are so young. You should be thinking about school, about friends, about your futures. And you still can. But you have to do it from here, from this place. Make it your own. There's a small, insulated workshop on the second level that I fixed up a bit. It's not much, but it can be made warm. There's a well with a hand pump out back that draws clean water. It's a start. I love you both more than words can say. I wish I could have given you a mansion. Instead, I gave you a tower of rust and a fight. But I have faith in you. You are millers. We are stubborn. We don't break. We endure. Be brave. Be smart. Trust each other. All my love, Grandpa. When Maya finished reading, the silence in the room was absolute. The letter trembled in her hands. A tear traced a clean path through the dust on her cheek and dripped onto the wooden desk. I couldn't speak. My mind was reeling, trying to process it all. The elevator, the deed, the truck, the money, the lawyer, the faceless corporation. It was too much. It was everything. He hadn't abandoned us. None of them had. Our parents were gone, but our grandfather, even in death, had been planning for this. He'd been building an ark for us. He saw the storm coming long before we did. The cruelty of our aunt, the helplessness, the fear. He had anticipated it all, and he had prepared a defense. I looked out the filthy window, past the grime, to the flat, gray land stretching out to the horizon. It didn't look empty anymore. It looked like a battlefield. And this tall, rusty, magnificent structure wasn't a ruin. It was a watchtower. It was a stronghold. It was home. I started to cry. Not quiet, hopeless tears like Maya's in the car, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs. I cried for my grandfather, for the love and foresight that reached across death to save us. I cried for the 2 lost years we'd spent feeling like orphans, like charity cases, when all along, this place was waiting for us. I cried for the anger and the fear that had been lodged in my chest for so long, and I felt it finally start to break apart. Maya came over and wrapped her arms around me, holding on tight. We stood there in the dusty, cold head house, 2 kids who had lost everything, and held the proof that we hadn't. We had a legacy. We had a purpose. We had a fight. And for the first time in a very long time, we had hope. It wasn't the easy, cheerful kind of hope. It was gritty and hard-won, smelling of rust and old grain. But it was real, and it was ours. If you've made it this far into our story, thank you. This is the part of the story where hope feels the furthest away, right before the dawn. It's the moment you realize you're completely on your own, but you also realize you have a choice to make. You can lie down, or you can stand up and fight, even if you don't know what you're fighting for yet. If this is hitting you, if you've ever had a moment like this in your own life, I want you to comment below and just write, "I'm still standing." You don't have to share the details unless you want to, but I want you to know, and I want everyone in this community to know, that you are not alone in that fight. Now, let's get back to what happened next. The emotional high of the letter carried us for about an hour. Then reality and the cold began to set in. The sun was going down, and the temperature inside the metal tower was dropping fast. The hazy light from the windows faded to a deep, bruised purple. We were exhausted, hungry, and standing in the dark, 100 feet above the ground, in an unheated metal can. The $10,000 felt 1,000,000 miles away. "Okay," Maya said, her voice practical again, the leader taking over. She wiped her eyes on her sleeve and folded the letter, placing it carefully back in the envelope. "First things first, we need to get down before it's pitch black, and we need to find that truck." We made our way back down the terrifyingly steep stairs, our phone flashlights seeming wholly inadequate against the encroaching dark. Back on the ground floor, the air was frigid. We located the collapsed wooden shed Grandpa had mentioned. The door was swollen shut, but a few solid kicks from me broke the rotted wood of the frame. Inside, shrouded in cobwebs and dust, was a vintage pickup truck. It was a beautiful, classic shape, but it was covered in a thick blanket of grime. "There's no way that thing runs," Maya said, her voice laced with doubt. "Grandpa said it did," I replied, my faith in him now absolute. I opened the driver's side door, which creaked in protest. The cab smelled of old vinyl and gasoline. I popped open the glove box, and there they were, a set of keys on a simple metal ring. I put the key in the ignition, said a silent prayer, and turned. The engine sputtered, it coughed, it whined. It sounded like it was gargling rocks. And then, with a roar that echoed through the shed, it turned over. The headlights flickered on, cutting two perfect, dusty cones into the darkness. Maya and I just stared at each other in the sudden light, our faces a mixture of shock and giddy disbelief. He'd done it. The old man had actually done it. We spent our first night in the cab of that truck, huddled together for warmth with the engine running for 10 minutes every hour until the gas tank was nearly empty. We ate the last of our squashed sandwiches and drank the last of our water. It was uncomfortable, cold, and we were both still terrified. But it was different now. The fear wasn't the shapeless, free-falling panic from that morning. It was a focused fear. We had a goal. We had a direction. The next morning, we woke up stiff and sore to a world painted in the pale, watery light of dawn. Our first task was clear: get to a bank. But before that, we needed a lawyer. We found Arthur Davies' business card in the envelope. He was based in a larger town about an hour away. We used the last of our cash to put a few gallons of gas in the truck at the town's only and very old gas pump. The attendant, a weathered old man with skeptical eyes, watched us the whole time. We were a curiosity. Two city kids in a resurrected ghost of a truck. The meeting with Mr. Davies was a turning point. He was exactly what you'd hope for in a small-town lawyer who was your dead grandfather's best friend. He was kind, patient, and wore a rumpled tweed jacket. He had known this was coming. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man," he said, looking at us over the top of his spectacles. "Stubborn as a mule and smarter than any 10 city lawyers. He set this all up perfectly. He made you bulletproof." He spent the next hour explaining everything. He had a copy of the death certificate ready. He explained how to access the bank account. He laid out the situation with Viridian Holdings, confirming everything Grandpa had written. They were a predatory real estate investment firm known for buying up land cheap and forcing out anyone who held out. "They'll come for you," he said, his expression serious. First, with a friendly offer, a real estate agent with a big smile and a bigger check. When you refuse, they'll get less friendly. They'll try to find code violations. They'll complain to the county. They'll try to isolate you, make your life difficult. They will try to break you. Your job is not to break. He gave us a list of things to do. Get a post office box. Get the electricity turned on. The elevator was still connected to the grid, though the service had been dormant for decades. Get a phone. He also gave us a cashier's check for $500. "A loan," he said, holding up a hand to stop our protests. "From me to you. Your grandfather's credit is still good with me. Pay me back when you're on your feet. Go buy some groceries and some warm clothes." Walking out of that office was like stepping into a new life. The fear was still there, but now it had a blueprint. We weren't just two lost kids anymore. We were landowners. We were clients. We had a mission. We went to the bank, and with the paperwork from Mr. Davies, the teller, after a long phone call to her manager, gave us access to the account. Seeing that balance, $10,000, on the screen was surreal. It felt like $1 million. It felt like breathing room. It felt like power. Our first stop was a grocery store. We didn't go crazy. We bought bread, peanut butter, canned soup, coffee, pasta, practical things. Then we went to a hardware store. We bought heavy-duty flashlights, work gloves, buckets, cleaning supplies, and a small propane heater. Our last stop was a thrift store, where we bought thick flannel shirts, work pants, and heavy wool blankets. By the time we drove back to Prairie Ridge, the bed of the old truck was loaded with the humble beginnings of a home. That night, we didn't sleep in the truck. We hauled our supplies up the 5 flights of stairs to the small, insulated workshop Grandpa had mentioned. It was a room off one of the landings, about 10 feet by 15, with a single grimy window and a solid metal door. He'd put up drywall and a wooden floor. It was still freezing, but it was contained. We set up the small propane heater, and the tiny space slowly began to warm up. We laid our new wool blankets on the floor, and for the first time, we slept in our own home. The next few weeks were a blur of hard physical labor. We started with the workshop. We scrubbed the walls and floor. We scraped the grime off the window until sunlight could properly stream in. We ran a heavy-duty extension cord down to an external power outlet Mr. Davies had told us about, and we had a single, bare light bulb and the ability to charge our phones. It was a palace. Then we started on the head house, the control room at the very top. That was our real goal. The views were spectacular, and we decided it would be our living room. We spent days just cleaning. We hauled buckets of water up all those stairs. We swept out decades of dust and grime. We washed the windows, inside and out, a terrifying task that involved leaning out 100 feet in the air. But when we were done, the room was transformed. Light flooded in, and you could see for miles in every direction. The flat, empty land didn't look menacing anymore. It looked beautiful, peaceful. It looked like ours. We started to establish a routine. In the mornings, we worked on the elevator, cleaning, exploring, making plans. There were so many spaces, so many hidden corners. We found an old locker room with forgotten work boots lined up neatly. We found a small office with a calendar still turned to August 1983. We were like archaeologists, uncovering the history of our own family. In the afternoons, we'd drive into town. We got a P.O. box. We opened an account at the hardware store. The owner, a gruff man named Hank, had been wary of us at first. But after our 5th trip in for lumber, wiring, and plumbing supplies, he started to warm up. He'd give us advice, tell us the best way to fix a leaky pipe or frame a wall. He never asked what we were doing, but he saw the determination on our faces, the calluses forming on our hands. Respect began to replace suspicion. The people in the diner, where we'd go for a hot meal once a week as a treat, started nodding to us. The waitress, Sarah, would always make sure our coffee cups were full. "You two are working hard out there," she said one day, with a small, approving smile. "Place is starting to look alive again." We were becoming part of the town, not just intruders. We weren't the city kids anymore. We were the elevator kids. And we were building something. Not just a home, but a reputation. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, it happened. A sleek black sedan, the kind that looks completely out of place in a town like Prairie Ridge, rolled slowly down our dirt road. It parked near the gate. A man in an expensive suit got out. He was holding a briefcase. He didn't try to come through the fence. He just stood there, looking up at the elevator, then down at a tablet in his hand. He took a few pictures with his phone. Then he got back in his car and drove away. He never said a word. Maya and I watched him from the high window of the head house. The friendly offers hadn't come. They had skipped right to intimidation. A cold dread washed over me. Mr. Davies was right. They were here. The fight had begun. That night, the reality of our situation sunk in deeper than ever before. The man in the suit hadn't been a ghost. He was a scout, a harbinger. The faceless corporation, Viridian Holdings, now had a face, even if it was just a stern-looking man in expensive clothes. We weren't just fixing up an old building anymore. We were occupying contested territory. Maya was quiet that evening, staring into the flame of our propane heater. "What do you think they'll do next?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What Mr. Davies said," I answered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "They'll try to push us, legally at first." "And if that doesn't work?" I didn't have an answer. We were two teenagers against a wealthy, powerful company. We had $10,000 and a stubborn streak. It didn't feel like a fair fight. Doubt, for the first time since finding Grandpa's letter, began to creep back in. Were we crazy to think we could do this? We could take the money, sell the property for whatever they offered, and disappear. We could get an apartment in a new city, find normal jobs, live normal lives. The thought was tempting. It was the easy path, safety. But then I looked around our little workshop turned bedroom. I saw the clean floors, the neatly stacked cans of soup, the single light bulb casting a warm golden glow. I thought of the view from the head house, of the sun rising over our land. I thought of Grandpa's handwriting, the weight of his trust in us. This is not about money. This is about home. "No," I said, shaking my head. "We're not selling. We're not running. This is ours." Maya looked at me, and a slow, determined smile spread across her face. "You're right," she said. "This is ours. So let's make it unsellable. Let's make it so completely and utterly our home that they'd look like monsters for trying to take it." That night, our mission shifted. It wasn't just about making the place livable anymore. It was about making it permanent. It was about putting down roots so deep they could never be pulled up. Our first big project was water. The hand pump out back worked, but hauling buckets up 5 flights of stairs was brutal. We found the old water pipes that ran up the inside of the elevator. With Hank's advice from the hardware store and a lot of trial and error, we managed to bypass the ancient, broken pump system and connect a new electric pump at the base. We ran new PEX tubing all the way to the top. The moment we turned on the faucet we'd installed in the head house and clean, cold water sputtered out, we whooped and cheered like we'd struck oil. It was a victory, a real, tangible piece of civilization we had built with our own hands. Next was heat. The propane heater was a temporary fix. We needed something permanent. In one of the lower storage rooms, we found an old cast-iron wood-burning stove. It was rusted, but solid. It weighed a ton. Getting it up to the head house was one of the hardest things I've ever done. We used a system of ropes and pulleys, hoisting it a few feet at a time. It took 2 full days. But when we finally got it installed, vented it through a window we'd replaced with sheet metal, and lit the first fire, the warmth that spread through the room was more than just physical. It was the warmth of security, of permanence. We started to truly transform the head house. We framed a small bathroom. We built kitchen counters out of salvaged lumber from one of the collapsed sheds. We ran wiring and installed proper lights. Every nail we hammered, every pipe we connected, was an act of defiance. We weren't just squatters. We were builders. We were homesteaders. About a month after the man in the suit appeared, the first official letter arrived at our P.O. box. It was from the county zoning office. A complaint had been filed. An anonymous complaint, it said, about an unauthorized dwelling in an industrial zone. We were ordered to appear at a hearing. "This is it," I said, holding the letter. We called Mr. Davies. He wasn't surprised. "It's their first move," he said calmly. "Don't panic. Your grandfather was clever. The property is zoned industrial, yes, but it's also grandfathered in with certain residential allowances because the co-op manager used to live on site. It's a loophole, a very small loophole, but it's there. We can fight this." The hearing was intimidating. It was in a sterile, official-looking room. A panel of 3 county commissioners sat at a high desk. We sat with Mr. Davies. On the other side of the room sat a sharp-suited lawyer from Viridian Holdings. They weren't anonymous anymore. The Viridian lawyer spoke first. He was smooth and confident. He talked about safety codes, about inappropriate land use, about the danger these 2 young people are putting themselves in. He painted us as irresponsible kids squatting in a dangerous ruin. Then it was Mr. Davies' turn. He calmly, methodically took their arguments apart. He presented the old zoning maps. He presented affidavits from 2 other old-timers in town who remembered the manager living in the elevator. He presented a portfolio of photos we had taken showing the work we had done, the new plumbing, the safe wiring, the wood stove installation that was up to code because we'd followed Hank's instructions to the letter. But the most powerful moment came when Maya spoke. Mr. Davies had asked if she wanted to, and she had said yes. She stood up, her voice not much more than a whisper at first, but it grew stronger with every word. "We're not squatters," she said, looking directly at the commissioners. "That building is the only thing our grandfather left us. It's the only home we have. We were kicked out of our last home with nothing. We came here because we had nowhere else to go. And yes, it was a ruin. But we've worked every single day to make it safe. We've cleaned it. We've repaired it. We pour our sweat and our savings into it. It's not just an industrial building to us. It's our home. And we are asking you not to let a corporation take our home away from us just because they want our land." There was a long silence when she finished. The head commissioner, a woman with tired eyes, looked at the Viridian lawyer, then at us. You could see the conflict on her face, the law versus the human story. In the end, they tabled the decision. A temporary victory, we had held them off. Walking out of that hearing, I felt a surge of pride for my sister. She had found her voice. She wasn't just my older sister, the reluctant guardian. She was a fighter, a leader. The story of the hearing got around town fast. The narrative shifted. We weren't just the eccentric elevator kids anymore. We were the underdogs, David fighting Goliath. People started talking to us more. Hank from the hardware store gave us a discount on our next purchase. Sarah from the diner packed us extra food to take home. An old farmer stopped us on the street and told us our grandfather would be proud. We were no longer alone. We had the town, however small and weathered, at our back. Viridian didn't give up. The letters kept coming. Fire code inspections, health department inquiries. Every week, a new bureaucratic hurdle. But with Mr. Davies's help, we met every challenge. We kept building. We kept improving. We made our home more and more undeniable. And then, deep in the winter, we made a discovery that changed everything again. We were clearing out one of the lowest levels of the elevator, a dark, damp basement area we'd avoided. In the corner, behind a pile of rotted sacks, was a small metal door I'd never noticed before. It was bolted shut. It took me an hour with a wrench to get the rusted bolts loose. The door opened into a small, concrete-walled room, a vault. Inside, there was a single, heavy metal footlocker. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. My breath caught in my throat. Maya gasped. The footlocker was filled with papers. Old, yellowed papers, ledgers, meeting minutes, and signed contracts from the 1950s. It was the complete original paperwork from the founding of the Prairie Ridge Farmers Co-op. And at the very bottom, there was a file folder. Inside was a series of letters and a signed confession from the man who had swindled the farmers, detailing exactly how he and his partner, a man with the last name of Caldwell, had falsified documents and engineered the bankruptcy. Caldwell. I knew that name. I'd seen it on the Viridian Holdings letterhead. The CEO was a man named Marcus Caldwell, the son, or grandson, of the man who had ruined our family 70 years ago. This wasn't just a random land grab. This was personal. They weren't just trying to buy our land. They were trying to bury the last piece of evidence of their family's original crime. Our grandfather hadn't just given us a fortress. He'd given us a time bomb, and we were sitting right on top of it. The discovery of the footlocker changed the texture of the fight. It was no longer just a defensive battle for our home. It was now an offensive one for our family's history and honor. The papers were a ghost, a 70-year-old crime crying out for justice. Marcus Caldwell wasn't just a faceless CEO anymore. He was the descendant of the man who broke my great-grandfather, the man who set in motion the chain of events that led to us standing on a roadside with nothing but a backpack. We took the entire footlocker to Mr. Davies. He spread the documents out on his massive conference table, his expression growing more and more grim as he read. He spent hours poring over the ledgers, the letters, the signed confession. "My God," he finally said, looking up at us, his eyes wide. This is a smoking gun. Your grandfather never told me he had this. He just told me the family story. He never said he had proof." "What does it mean?" Maya asked, her voice tense. "It means the entire Viridian Holdings Company is built on a foundation of fraud," Mr. Davies explained. "The original seed money, the very start of the Caldwell family fortune, was stolen from the farmers of Prairie Ridge. This confession, it's legally binding. The statute of limitations for the crime itself is long past, of course. But for a civil claim of fraudulent enrichment, there might not be one. especially since they're actively trying to acquire the very land where the evidence is hidden. It shows a pattern. He leaned back in his chair, a slow, calculating smile spreading across his face. It was the first time I'd ever seen him look like a shark. They think you're two kids in a shack. They have no idea you're holding the key to their entire corporate history. We don't have to fight their zoning complaints anymore. We can take the fight to them. The plan he laid out was audacious. We wouldn't just release the documents to the press. That would be messy and unpredictable. Instead, we would use them as leverage. Mr. Davies would contact Viridian's legal team directly. He would inform them that we were in possession of certain historical documents pertaining to the founding of their company. He would suggest a meeting. They will try to buy it off you, he warned. They will offer you an obscene amount of money to make this go away. Millions, maybe. You will have to be ready for that. The thought of millions of dollars was dizzying. We could go anywhere, do anything. We could buy a real house, with central heating and more than one room. We could go to college without worrying about debt. It was the easy way out, magnified 1,000 times. No, I said, the word coming out before I'd even consciously thought it. It's not about the money. I looked at Maya, and she nodded in agreement. Grandpa was right, she said. Some things are more important. What do we want, Mr. Davies, if not money? He smiled. Justice, in a form of your choosing. We can demand they drop all claims to any land in Prairie Ridge. We can demand they establish a fund, a form of reparations for the descendants of the other families they cheated. We can demand they publicly acknowledge the truth. We can make them pay, not with a check to you, but with a debt to the past. That was the answer. It felt right. It felt true to our grandfather's legacy. It wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. The call was made. The meeting was set. It took place not in a sterile boardroom, but in our home, in the head house. It was our turf, our territory. We cleaned it until it shone. We stoked the wood stove until the room was warm and welcoming. We made coffee. We were not victims petitioning a king. We were landowners greeting a guest. Marcus Caldwell came himself. He was older than I expected, with silver hair and cold blue eyes. He came with 2 lawyers, but he walked in alone, leaving them at the bottom of the stairs. He was trying to project an air of casual power, but I could see the tension in his shoulders as he looked around the room we had built, at the incredible view from the windows. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'm told you have something that belongs to me," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "We have something that belongs to the history of this town," Maya corrected him, her voice calm and steady. She slid a single file folder across the table we'd built. It contained a photocopy of the confession. Caldwell opened it. He read it without a change in his expression, but I saw a muscle twitch in his jaw. He closed the folder. "A quaint piece of local history. What do you want for it? I'm prepared to be very generous. Let's say $5 million? For the documents, the elevator, all of it. You can walk away and never look back." $5 million. The number hung in the air, so large it was almost meaningless. I could feel its pull, a gravitational force threatening to tear down everything we'd built. I glanced at Maya. Her face was like stone. "We don't want your money, Mr. Caldwell," she said. "Your money is stained with the history in that folder. We want justice." And then she laid out our terms, the ones we had worked out with Mr. Davies. Viridian Holdings would cease all acquisition attempts in Prairie Ridge County effective immediately. They would sell back any undeveloped land they had acquired to a newly formed town trust for the price they paid. They would establish a $2 million community grant fund, administered by that trust, to revitalize the town's main street and support local businesses. And they would issue a formal, public apology to the families of the original Prairie Ridge Farmers Co-op for the predatory business practices of their founder. Caldwell stared at her, his mask of calm finally cracking. He looked genuinely shocked. "You're refusing $5 million? For that? For a grant for this ghost town?" "This ghost town is our home," I said, finding my voice. "And it's full of people whose grandparents and great-grandparents you robbed. You're not just buying our silence, you're paying a debt." He was quiet for a long time, looking out the window at the land his family had tried to conquer for 70 years. He was beaten. He knew it. The cost of a public lawsuit, of this story getting out, would be far greater than our terms. "You're your grandfather's family, all right," he finally said, a note of grudging respect, or maybe just weariness in his voice. "Stubborn. You'll have your deal." He stood up, left the folder on the table, and walked out of our home without another word. We listened to his footsteps fading down the metal stairs. When the sound was gone, Maya and I just looked at each other. And then we started to laugh. We laughed until tears streamed down our faces. We had done it. We had won. Not just for us, for Grandpa, for the whole town. The aftermath was quiet but profound. The legal agreements were drawn up and signed. The black sedans disappeared. The letters from the county stopped. The town trust was formed, with Mr. Davies and, to our surprise, Hank from the hardware store on the board. The revitalization fund was real. Plans were being drawn up to reopen the old diner, to fix up the abandoned storefronts. A flicker of life was returning to Prairie Ridge. For us, life settled into a new kind of normal. I re-enrolled in high school in the next town over, driving the old pickup to school every day. Maya took online college courses and managed the grant applications for the town trust. We kept working on the elevator. We finished the living space in the head house, turning it into a beautiful, rustic, circular apartment with a 360-degree view of the world. We started work on converting some of the other, smaller silos into guest rooms, maybe a workshop for Maya, who had discovered a love for woodworking. The elevator was no longer a fortress or a weapon. It was just a home. A strange, tall, cylindrical home, but a home nonetheless. It was a landmark. People in town started calling it the Miller Tower. It wasn't a monument to what was lost anymore. It was a beacon of what could be rebuilt. Looking back, it's hard to believe it all started with being kicked out, with that desperate, hopeless feeling on the side of a highway. It's hard to believe it all started with a $5 investment in a pile of rust. But our grandfather knew. He knew that the value of a thing isn't what it's worth in money. It's the potential it holds. It's the story it tells. It's the foundation it gives you to build a life on. We were given a tower of rust in a fight, and in winning the fight, we turned the rust into a home, and in the process, we found ourselves. We learned that home isn't a place you're given, but a place you make. We learned that the past is never truly dead, and that sometimes the only way to build a future is to settle the debts of history. And we learned that even when you feel lost and alone, you can find your strength in the legacy of those who loved you, and in the stubborn, beautiful, and irrational act of choosing to stay and fight for what is yours. Our story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. The revitalization of Prairie Ridge will take years. Our home will always be a work in progress. But it's a good beginning. It's a hopeful one. If you want to see what happens next, If you want to follow the journey of this town and our crazy elevator home, hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you with us. But more than that, I want you to look at the comments below. Look at all the people who wrote, "I'm still standing." You are part of a community of fighters, of survivors, of builders. Share a piece of your story if you feel comfortable. Tell us about a time you chose the harder path, about a time you fought for your home, whatever that home may be. Because these are the stories that matter. These are the stories that remind us that even from the deepest pit of despair, we can build our way back into the light. Thank you for listening.